Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us in our session today. We're going to be talking all about global studies and the benefits and advantages of a unified platform approach. I'm Heather DiFrusicia, the Associate Director here at Axiom Real-Time Metrics of the Randomization and Trial Supply Management, or IWRS department, and I'm here with my colleague Brian today. Brian?
Hi, Heather. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Dempster. I'm the Senior Director of Global Clinical Management here at Axiom Real-Time Metrics.
And we're going to be talking to you a little bit about kind of the situation when you have data in separate systems and what that unified approach can do for you, specifically in the context of a global study. And of course, when we're talking about global studies, it's even more exacerbated when it comes to the impacts of data in separate systems, whether it's ePro, your EDC, eTMF, your inventory data. It can really add additional challenges in being able to kind of combine the data, be able to even look at the data to make decisions. So what we do here at Axiom is we really drive collaboration through that visibility and access into your data, into your real-time data. And we do that with our Fusion platform. Everything from EDC, data management, of course, RTSM, CTMS, and ePro, and that gives you that 24/7 visibility. So global studies, where do we start? So of course, you're going to start by some key questions, country selection, and of course, the planning that goes behind it. Brian?
Thanks, Heather. It's very important, I think, in a global study to break the study down into its regions and then build it back up into that global nature. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach to a global study. You have to be aware of the differences that exist in each region and factor those into your global planning. So timelines are very important, obviously, specifically around regulatory considerations. Also, timelines around individual holidays in different regions may affect your study planning, and you may have to consider those things. Incidences of disease and option for mutual acceptance is very important. So for incidence of disease, you have to think about your patient populations and where you're going to find, which regions you're going to find those patients that best suit your study. That's a very important thing when it comes to enrollment, obviously. And there's also, where regulatory is concerned, opportunity for combined submissions in some regions where they will have mutual acceptance of submissions. So another thing to think about. And then one thing that's often overlooked in global studies is the importance of local knowledge and cultural expertise in those studies. You can, again, just as we said, you can't have a one-size-fits-all to a global study and infer an understanding of one region on another. It's very important to have people on the ground who understand what's required from local regulatory agencies and what's required from individual sites and what their expectations are. And then finally, time zones have to be considered as well. We've all been in those meetings where somebody has to get up at 5 in the morning so that somebody else can have an 11 o'clock call, for example. Those things have to happen, but a consideration of those things is very important when you're planning timelines around who needs to be where and when.
So just on those key challenges when we're talking about global studies, so we're going to be taking you through a few today: communication, regulatory approvals, safety reporting, data management and monitoring, and our clinical supplies. Brian?
So communication, thanks, Heather. Communication is critically important regardless of where your study is being run, but it's even more important to consider the challenges of communication when you're dealing with multinational and possibly multi-language studies as well. So first of all, a global communication plan has to be thought of. And within that global communication plan, you have to consider how you're going to make sure that everybody is getting the same message, regardless of the disparate approach to that message being generated. One thing that we recommend is distribution lists that both work at a regional and global level and roll up, and also global meetings that occur at a frequent event that brings everybody under the same page. Agreeing standards for communication across all regions at the start of the study is critically important so that everybody has an expectation of what is required. And again, the importance of making local considerations for the global plan is also very important. So start globally, work down regionally, and then build back up to a global level.
Absolutely. And on that note, I know, Brian, that you mentioned around the distribution list. Another way to kind of centralize that communication is with technology, specifically looking at modules such as the general log that we have available. And what that does is it allows for a central location where the sites can submit their questions. As soon as those questions are entered, then key parties are receiving an email notification in real time, and then based on the type of question, then the applicable party can respond. The site's getting that notification, and the site can then respond from there as needed. And with that, of course, that follows that kind of approach to emails. However, instead of just using that distribution list, you also, and you have to save those communications in the eTMF, etc. In this case, everything's already in one place, so you can actually do an output of all of that information, and you can even kind of collect it and tailor it down a little bit to an accessible Q&A log. So there's a lot of added efficiencies here just for that site communication itself, but also the ability to share that information with the study team as well.
Regulatory approvals are very, very important, obviously, as we all know, whether the study is global or local. But the difference with a global study is the volume of different and disparate regulatory approvals that are required. And again, it's very important to consider these when you're considering your overall critical path for study timelines. Again, right at the start of the study, you should have a global plan. You should gain the knowledge from the local contacts on the ground as to when regulatory approvals can be submitted, how long each approval will take to acquire in each region, and that information should then be collated at a global level to create a global study plan, which means that you can spend your resource where it's going to be most effective at the most effective time. So one of the things that Heather will talk about in a moment, which is really important, is how you measure each of those milestones in the region. It's very good to have a plan, but it's very important to know that your plan is based on information that's coming from the local level.
Absolutely, and utilizing technology like the Study Startup module allows for that automation and centralizing of that information. So you're able to identify your key metrics. Are you staying on track? What is that level of site readiness per region, and where is the status of this submissions and approvals around the IRBs, as well as maintaining your key contacts. So it's being able to automate those trackers, but also use the technology to your most advantage, because Fusion's able to tell you, the technology is able to tell you when you're off track or when you might be approaching it or at risk. On the safety side, then, of course, there's reporting requirements that do differ per region. There's also reporting needed at the event level, also quarterly, annually. So being able to centralize your safety data is key. And also when we're talking about SRCs, any of those data review and monitoring committees, then when we're talking about globally, then we really want to make sure that there's that global representation in those committees as well. So then you're making sure that each region is able to provide their input. The technology here is the safety module. And so when we're looking at those different pieces of information. That's everything from the initial site reporting of the event, being able to review and work with the site through queries, any additional safety assessments required at the reviewer level, and then, of course, your medical monitor case narrative around the event, and then the actual reporting and submissions. So being able to have everything in one place from the initial event reporting over to that regulatory submission, then you're able to more easily work with all of the different requirements across the regions. Just looking at our challenge number 4 around data management and monitoring, and in this case, we've actually broken it down further. We have our data protection to start. So when you're looking at a global study, there can be regional differences in the data that can be captured. So specifically, when we're talking about subject data, can you have the date of birth? Is it okay to have a full date of birth? Does it have to be partial? Do you have to only collect the age? Other data that you can consider is initials, shipment addresses when you're talking about direct-to-patient information, direct-to-patient shipments, as well as contact info, phone, email, and that's when we're getting into ePro activities. And so this, of course, is not a complete list, or we could probably have a whole separate presentation just on the data protection, but again, just want to highlight a couple of key items. Other items include the source document. So there's regional specific processes around can you have the sites upload directly, and then if something is missed, there is some PHI, then that can be then de-identified and move forward with the next step. Or do you need to go back to the site, have that removed, and move forward from there? Additional blinding requirements, so making sure there's the appropriate restrictions in place. If you are capturing the subject shipment addresses, if you are capturing that subject contact info, then you need to make sure there's the proper protocols in place for encryption, etc. And of course, you can't avoid database security, so ensuring that the platform that you're using has those key technical safeguards and requirements for encryption around data transfers, etc., ensuring that you're meeting all of the regulatory protection requirements. The other side is the data capture and review, so making sure that we can centralize that monitoring and data management activity. Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the risk-based monitoring?
Absolutely. I think risk-based monitoring is becoming more and more prevalent, and the monitoring aspect of choice for a lot of studies and a lot of sponsors. But it is important to recognize that monitoring at a risk base has a different outlook in each different region. So again, it's coming back to that core message of one size doesn't fit all. You have to adapt to each region and then bring that back to a global level with a plan that works for you. One thing I would recommend is that the UK regulatory body, the MHRA, has a grey guide which gives an excellent summary of risk-based monitoring. And that's a good place to start to understand the overall process and considerations. But bearing in mind that once you have that overall appreciation at a global level, you have to consider how that applies at the local region. And again, that local knowledge becomes critically important as you're beginning to set up that global plan for monitoring.
And on the enrollment workflow side, so when we have our subjects coming in and we want to have that extra layer of review, whether it's just eligibility based on labs or image review, then having that centralized adjudication or enrollment review process ensures that consistency across the board, as well as keeping everyone on track when it comes to timelines and pending actions. That regional specific enrollment can also, of course, play a part. So whether you're pooling certain sites and regions for analysis, then being able to, again, have everything in one place, then you can appropriately stratify, etc., when it comes to the enrollment piece. So with that, then our solutions, we're going to touch on a few here. So the Econsent. So of course, Econsent allows for a standardized workflow. It's removing that ability to have an interpretation that's specific for certain regions or sites. It's also ensuring that the appropriate amendment is being used. So there's that ease of updating and controlling when it comes to which version. Additionally, when it comes to documentation, especially with a global trial, then the importance of having that real-time information and removing the need for scanning and uploading the documents after the eConsent module is capturing that information in real time. There's additional ability when it comes to reducing burden on the site level, because as soon as that eConsent is complete, then you can go right into the subject data entry, etc., and also kind of populating over what those key data points are, date of consent, etc. So we're minimizing any redundant data entry, as well as minimizing or reducing any data entry errors. And of course, we're just talking about this, but that ability to centralize and facilitate remote monitoring is a part of this piece as well. For adjudication and randomization, there can be so many different pieces and potential technologies that really need to come together to support that process. So being able to eliminate those manual trackers and being able to have all of that data in one place really allows for streamlining of the process. So being able to activate randomization or a specific cohort or dose, and then opening up at the study level or site level for the pre-screening activities to begin. Subjects are consented. They're going to proceed with completing their screening data entry as required. And then this is where that enrollment review or medical monitor review comes in. And of course, you can't avoid those real-time notifications that are key to making sure that everyone has that awareness, especially around eligibility, any follow-up actions or clarifications required. From there, then, of course, if the subject is approved, then the site can have the subject come back in for that baseline visit, any final data entry and randomization, and then that goes right into being able to move forward with that IP assignment based on the applicable dose. So you can really see end to end, we have all of these pieces coming together, often many manual trackers, but you're able to do everything in one place. For the clinical supplies, then there's the global considerations, because you need to make sure you're meeting all of the regulatory requirements when it comes to labeling, whether it's the required languages as well as key statements. If you're working just in the US, then of course you don't require that expiry date, whereas other regulatory bodies do. And you can't avoid, again, when we're talking about manual trackers, you definitely don't want to be managing your global study manually when it comes to shipments, the accountability, the return. Having that real-time data means the difference, means all the difference, especially when it comes to planning and forecasting. And so that's where you have that inventory management module, where it really needs to have everything from program down to that subject level accountability. So we've talked about quite a few solutions today, and there's definitely some recurring themes. We have that one size fits all when it comes to global scenarios and approaches, but that technology really brings that data in for that global awareness, visibility, having the reports and dashboards so you can easily monitor and act as needed, as well as, of course, that traceable audit log and your key notifications and those end of study outputs that really allow everything to come together at end of study. So what we've been talking about all along, some of the different aspects of Fusion, and it really can act as your connected hub for your study data. You're able to really pick and choose the key modules that are needed for your study. We've mentioned quite a few today, and all with a single access. There's all different types of approaches when it comes to what your needs are. So you can do everything from a specific module, a standalone, to that complete Fusion suite, which of course, as we saw today, you'll receive the most benefits. The same goes for our services, where you can really pick and choose based on what you need, and we have the technology and the expertise behind it. One thing that we kept talking about today was just that real-time access, and it's really important that you can really own that access. You have availability 24/7 real-time, whether it's reporting or the notification, so that you really have that awareness of any potential upcoming risks or actionable risks. And Axiom's here to really support you in your studies with the technology, with the team, and the team being a key part as we are truly committed to the study success. So just want to thank you for your time today. And of course, please come by our booth to talk about your needs. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.